This module is about adding more interactivity to Elm web apps. Here is the plan. First, in this clip, we are going to look into approaches for growing web apps with more interactivity, for example, by using more data types. Second, we are going to do some refactoring of the shopping cart to make the code cleaner. Third, we are going to add more interactivity to the shopping cart. And finally, we are going to add a submit button to the shopping cart and some validation logic. As Elm web apps grow and they get more interactive, we run into the question of how to handle many events. Here is the diagram with the model view update pattern. The update function receives various events and has the logic to handle them. For example, clicking a button sends a message. If we add more buttons to the web app, then we need to send more corresponding messages using more variants of a message custom type. How about handling events for selecting a value from a dropdown? Well, one approach is to add a new variant for each value in the dropdown, which means an awkward increase in the number of message variants. Now, what if we need to handle the string in an input tag? This will make it even more complicated. Fortunately, Elm has an elegant solution to prevent such a huge growth in the number of message variants. The solution is to use variants with payloads of other types. In this definition, the message custom type has 3 variants. Each variant is simple in the sense that it carries no payload. Here is another definition which has a mix of variants. Notice that select also has an associated integer, which means that the select variant has an integer payload that contains the selected value from the dropdown. Instead of lots and lots of variants for each possible value in the dropdown, just use a variant to indicate the dropdown and an integer with a selected value. Similarly, the input variant has a string payload. The string payload can store the text from an input tag. Variants work smoothly with case expressions, which can also match by variants with payloads. For example, this branch allows matching by the select variant and its integer, which is stored in the amount variable that can be further used in the corresponding expression. The second approach for implementing large Elm web apps is about extensible records. As web apps evolve and grow, they require more complex state to keep the underlying data of web apps. This means models grow in complexity. A typical scenario is that models turn into records with many fields. This complicates the rest of the code, since some functions need various different fields from a model instead of the whole model. To simplify the code, the solution is to restrict function arguments so that they only get the data they need instead of the full model. Extensible records are a special kind of records with a fixed core of required fields and an unrestricted bunch of other optional fields. This makes them very useful for restricting function arguments. Here is an example. To define a new extensible record, use the type alias syntax with an extra type variable. The lowercase I is also used inside the definition, followed by the pipe symbol and the 2 required string fields, name and photo. The new extensible record can be used as input for the new show function. Notice that it's item of I, not just item. The 2 required fields can then be used inside the function. Let's say we have a very large record model which has name, photo, and many other fields. The beauty of extensible records is that the show function works nicely with a large model since it only needs name and photo. The third approach to implement large Elm web apps is called let expressions. Here is the big idea about let expressions. Let's say we have a case expression with several branches and plenty of Elm code which has various definitions and sub-expressions for each branch. The point of let expressions is to split such code in 2 parts. The first part starts with the let keyword and it has various definitions enclosed in a local scope. The second part uses the in keyword so that we can read it like this. Let's use these definitions in the following case expression. The local scope ensures those definitions are only visible to the case expression itself, which avoids polluting the outside scope. Furthermore, let expressions can also be used with any other expression. Here is a super basic let expression. The greeting function returns 2 concatenating strings, which are defined inside the let expression. these two variables are only visible to the corresponding expression. Read it like this. Let's use these definitions in the following expression. Overall, use 3 approaches to implement growing web apps with more interactivity. First, use custom types with payloads to take care of the growing number of messages. Second, use extensible records to work with very large models. Third, use let expressions to make the code easier to understand by moving definitions into a separate local scope. Let's demo these approaches.